Good morning and welcome to our community affairs program that we call 30 Minutes. Today we will hear from Tennessee 8th District U.S. Congressman David Kustoff. Congressman Kustoff was in Union City for a legislative event held at the Obion County Farm Bureau office. We hope you enjoy today's program.
Thank you all very much. So if I can, I want to talk about a few topics, and then whatever else you want to ask about, or whatever you want to talk about. I came back from Washington sometime Friday. We've been on the road, as Hadley, as you mentioned yesterday. We went to the mega site and toured Blue Oval City, which I've done before. It's been almost a year since I've actually toured it like we did yesterday. You all know this. It is a massive, mammoth project. And it's large, and you really, in my opinion, like me, you can't appreciate it unless you're there seeing it. When we were there yesterday, Ed, because I think you asked the question, construction workers on site yesterday, what was the number? It was
4,500
on site yesterday. So when the first vehicle is produced next year, you're going to have almost 6,000 employees between Ford and SK, which is the battery maker. And that does not count the other suppliers that are in and around the mega site like Magnum. So anyway, it no doubt it will transform our way of life in West Tennessee. The border is the number one issue. It is the thing that I hear the most about it, and I think it's probably what 434 other congressmen hear the most about. Let me put it in perspective, because I've been to the border under President Trump. Ed and I went to the border under President Biden. Some of these numbers are incredible, and you may have read them, you may have seen them, but if you don't mind, let me talk about them. Since Joe Biden has been president, we go back now over 3 years, there have been 7.4 million apprehensions at the southern border. Those are the people that we've apprehended, not the ones that have gotten away. The immigration judge, this is an incredible figure, and I saw this morning. Immigration judges have thrown out approximately 2,000 deportation cases because the Department of Homeland Security did not file the required notice to appear on the scheduled hearing. Last month in February, the highest known month for totals for apprehension at the southern border, 189,000. And last year, our border, and I think our border control officers and law enforcement at the southern border, they do a really good job. They're doing hard work. They apprehended last year 27,000 pounds of fentanyl, and that's good. By the way, that's enough fentanyl to kill every single American. But it doesn't count the fentanyl that actually got across and came into our border and came into places like West Tennessee. So you know this stuff. I've kind of given you the facts. And so your question is, well, what can we do? And what do we do? And I think I mentioned the beginning of the Biden administration because that is when President Biden issued executive orders turning back some of the Trump-era policies, like Remain in Mexico. He's gotten rid of Title 42. During his campaign, he kind of laid out the welcome mat for people to come through. We want people to come through the right way. There's a right way, there's a wrong way. And we've got a lot of people who are doing it the wrong way. Very simply, President Biden could reverse some of the executive orders that he's issued in the early days of his administration and now. I mean, that's one thing. Ed and I can tell you, we've walked along parts of the southern border where there is border wall, okay? And there are places where the wall just stops because the construction stopped. We walked along one place in New Mexico, along the New Mexico border, where the materials for the wall were laying on the ground, but not going in the ground. And I asked somebody at Border Control what I was looking at, and she told me that was the material for the wall, but the construction order stopped when President Biden became president. Now that makes me mad, because that is your taxpayer money that I know I voted for to expend to build the wall, and the wall stopped. So we can start resuming construction of the wall. Those are some simple things that we can do to curb this flow until we get to the election. If I can, I want to talk about a few other issues before we answer questions that you all have. The Farm Bill. So it's come up a lot. I'll tell you that a number of things. As you know, the Farm Bill is a 5-year bill. It actually expired last year. We renewed it for an additional year. We've got in the House Ag Chairman is Glenn Thompson from Pennsylvania, G.T. Thompson. He's been working really hard to try to structure a good farm bill. And Matt, I know we talked about this. He's gone all around the country, including Tennessee, doing listening tours, talking to farmers, talking to growers, talking to everybody, trying to get input to structure the best bill. Hang with me for just a minute, because on the money part, on the actual funding part of the farm bill, the ag concerns are, and I know, Will, we've gone back and forth on these numbers, anywhere from 20 to 30%, and actually maybe closer to 20. The remaining 70 to 80, probably closer to 80, are SNAP benefits and funding for WIC, which is women and children. So again, most of the money goes for SNAP. And from time to time, I had people that come up and say, why don't you separate that out? Why don't you take the SNAP benefits, put that in a different bill, and leave the farm bill strictly ag? And the answer is, the Farm Bureau educated me about this very early on. You don't want to do that, because you've got congressmen from all across the country. You've got rural congressmen like me, who I've learned a lot from y'all in my time in office. You've got urban congressmen. Now, the urban congressmen, if the SNAP was separated out, they probably wouldn't care anything about the farm bill. And maybe the opposite is true also. So you want to keep it. That's one reason you want to keep everything together. We're working hard. In my opinion, this is not substance. This is more process. When former Speaker McCarthy was removed as Speaker in October, and it took us about 3 weeks to get Mike Johnson as the Speaker, a really good man, by the way, somebody I think all of y'all would like and respect. We lost a lot of time. And you probably know that with the funding also, because in the last few weeks, we have just now done the fiscal 2024 year funding. We've just gotten that done. It was supposed to be done by the end of September. So my point is, we lost some valuable time that goes to the Farm Bill. I know that Chairman Glenn Thompson, Speaker Mike Johnson, David Kustoff were all committed to try to get this done as soon as possible. Now that the funding is out of the way, that's a good thing. You mentioned Ways and Means. So the oldest committee in the House of Representatives, the only one mentioned in the Constitution. I talked to Art Sparks a lot about different issues. One thing that I've been paying a lot of attention to is the next year we have the expiration of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Now you may say, well, why is that important? It's important because, in my opinion, in the Trump years. If that's not the most significant piece of legislation that we passed, it ranks right up there. So with that tax bill, what we did is we lowered everybody's taxes. We lowered the rates, we lowered the brackets, we doubled the standard deduction, which means fewer people have to itemize. And Art, I think my numbers show that today, you may know this from your people, that 89 to 90 to 91% take the standard deduction. They don't have to itemize. It's a big deal. In the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we took the estate tax exemption and we doubled it. So now you can correct me on my numbers, for a single person, we're around $12 million. I know it's indexed for, what's the number? Is it
13.6.
Okay. And so it's double that for a married couple. That's been indexed for inflation. So ladies and gentlemen, I bring that up because as a Congress, if we don't do anything before December of 2025, it all goes away. It all reverts back to where the tax rates were and the tax brackets in 2017. I think that tax bill, and by the way, we lowered the corporate rate from 35 to 21% to make C Corps competitive with the rest of the world. We lowered the rates for S Corps. That's one reason that we had such a strong economy during the Trump years, before COVID and during COVID. It's one reason. So we need to focus on trying to get those provisions extended. My opinion is that will not happen until after the November election. And depending on the results of the November election, it's going to be it's going to be either hard, really hard, or impossible. So we've got our work cut out for us. We did pass a good corporate tax bill in the last month and a half that had a strong vote out of the Ways and Means Committee. I believe the vote was 40-3. When it came for a vote on the House floor, we got over 350 votes. It's standing in the Senate. So we'll wait and see what happens. If I can, the last issue before I open it up to questions. Last year was the first year that I decided to take part in what are called community funding projects. They went away for a long time. They came back in 2022, I think, 21 or 22. We worked on them last year. And that is directed federal spending that congressmen can try to argue for the benefit of their district. And I-69, as we all know, is crucially important to our district and our livelihood. And now with Blue Oval, you can take that and amplify it. And I'm proud that we were able, in the last few weeks, to secure for the Troy bypass here in Obion County $10 million, which is significant. By the way, the rule on these community funding projects is if a member of Congress requests the money, well, there are a lot of rules, but one rule is all the money has to be spent within that 1 year, that one fiscal year. So we're working now on the other projects that we're going to advocate for in the 2025 fiscal year. I will say we were also able to secure $5 million in Henry County for Highway 641, which is significant, and then two others. One was for Tipton, Haywood, and Fayette, $1 million for a wastewater project study, and then $5 million for the Memphis Airport for de-icing equipment. So that's all good. Those are good, hard projects, and they'll benefit everybody in West Tennessee. So as I wind down and get ready for any questions or comments that you all have, let me say this. It's a real honor to get to do what I do. And I realize when I'm in Washington and I'm voting on these important issues that I'm your eyes and your ears and your voice. and I don't take that for granted. So with that, Lindsay and Hadley, let me say thank you to you all, and open it up to questions or comments from anybody that wants to ask a question. Yes, sir.
I got two different questions, and you may have mentioned it, but regarding the farm bill, do you expect to see something get done with that prior to the election, or where do you see things going with that? And then second question, you didn't talk anything about it, but could you talk a little bit about China and relations with them, and where that situation stands with Taiwan and just our overall trade with China?
Yeah. So all good questions. You asked about the timing of the farm bill. The hope is to get it done before the election. I know like I said, it's a priority for Speaker Johnson. It's a priority for Glenn Thompson, who's the House chairman. I didn't mention this, but in the Senate, the chairman of the Ag Committee is Debbie Stabenow from Michigan. She's retiring. This will be a legacy bill for her. And I just say that there are a lot of incentives to try to get it done. Again, one of my arguments is that if we hadn't lost so much time late last year trying to get our house in order, that we likely would have had it done by now. So China's very complicated. We're deeply intertwined with China as it relates to trade and production. One thing that I've looked from in my committee on the Ways and Means Committee, and by the way, I mentioned tax, the committee has jurisdiction over tax, trade, concurrent jurisdiction, healthcare, Social Security, but the trade and tax aspect is something that I've been focused on, we've been focused on from a manufacturing standpoint. So what can we do to incentivize to bring manufacturing either out of China back to the U.S. or out of China to somewhere else? And those are things we're working through. It becomes really problematic because geopolitically, it is not a question of if China will invade Taiwan. It's a question of when. President Xi has as much as said that. And so whether that happens in 3 months or 3 years, we as a nation have to decide what role, if any, we're going to have. What are we going to do, or what are we not going to do? And so it is very complicated. A lot of that it's driven top down, right? I mean, we're a co-equal branch with the executive branch, but on that issue, that really is led from the White House. That's really is led from the president, and you get a lot of mixed messages. So we continue to stay focused on it. One more thing that you didn't ask, but I think it's important, and maybe that leads into it, is a vote that we had on TikTok about 2 weeks ago. So TikTok is a national security threat. And there may be some of you that use TikTok or on TikTok. You really need to be careful because of the data concerns, the data that's being captured by the Chinese, and the influence that the Chinese are pushing through TikTok to its users, primarily to young people. And so the vote that we had in the House was not to shut TikTok down, but was to force the Chinese to divest from TikTok. And I don't have the vote count, but that also got 350 votes in the House, which is strong. And we'll see what the Senate does. By the way, there are some potential buyers in the U.S. who want to buy TikTok. Stephen Mnuchin, who's the former Treasury Secretary, has said that he would like to buy or is interested in buying TikTok. Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank is interested. You've got other social media companies that are interested. But good questions. Hopefully I answered it. Thank you. Other questions?
Congressman Kustoff, can you explain to us the situation facing now in the House of Representatives, especially the Republican Party, with the resignation of two of your members, and your majority was slim anyway? How is that going to affect important legislation going forward?
So that's also a really good question. You know, our margin is down to, I think, 1 right now before the special elections. Congressman Ken Buck, his resignation took effect on Friday. Congressman Mike Gallagher, a good man, his resignation takes effect in April. There's some special elections that are happening, that have happened. One that's going on in Ohio to fill Bill Johnson's seat. He resigned back in February. Former Speaker McCarthy resigned in California. I think the runoff for that is in May. Leaving somebody out. We've got a Democrat Congressman Higgins in New York. There'll be a special election for him. Ken Buck, who you mentioned a moment ago, there'll be a special election May or June to fill his spot. And so the answer is, Charles, that 2 Republican congressmen don't need to be in the same car at the same time. Or on a plane together. No, I'm just joking about that. You're right. And so on any day, attendance is really important. But at the same time, we've got business to do. We've got business to do, and we've got to get it done. I'm glad the government funding is behind us, but we've got the Farm Bill reauthorization. We've got the FAA reauthorization. We've got the 2025 fiscal year funding that we need to do, the authorizations. So we've got a lot to do. And we've got to figure out what, if anything, we're going to do on giving aid to Israel. Other questions, comments?
No country does well unless they have cheap food and cheap energy. Fortunately, our farmers are the most efficient in the world, so we have always had cheap food. We have had pretty cheap energy until these past few years when they have trying to do the solar and windmills and all like that. And that is the very most inefficient energy source that we have ever had. The most efficient in the long run, in my opinion, is uranium, nuclear. And I think we need to put all of the energy, effort, and money on developing small nuclear plants, not water, but salt, because that is much safer and easier to build. What is Congress thinking on those issues?
So let me take the last part first. TVA agrees with you, and I think I agree with TVA. They've really bought in to these very small modular nuclear reactors that can be placed all over for exactly what you just talked about. Clean energy, cheap energy, easier on the environment. Frankly, it's also an education process for TVA or any other power supplier. Because you and I have just had this conversation that we talked about it at this level. People are going to want to have a lot of questions about cost and about safety and about the environment. And so I think it falls to TVA and other power suppliers to come in the communities and talk about the technology, to come to Kiwanis and Rotary and Farm Bureau and lay it out. When they do with us, it makes a lot of sense. And we'll again put you on the spot. I know we've talked. They in East Tennessee, they have developed one, or they are in the process.
They have not turned one online yet, but they are, and they want to add multiple others.
Yeah.
Is it salt or is it water? There's a big difference.
I do not.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
We can find out. I'm not sure. On the first part of your question, and I give this response frequently, it really matters who governs. You know, last week I had some automobile dealers who were in Washington, and they were concerned because the EPA that day had just come out with a mandate for automobile makers about the miles per gallon, which they've raised. What they've done is they have forced, and they're forcing automobile makers to produce electric vehicles whether they want to or not, and whether the public wants it or not. Now, I'm going to say right there, we've got a great new facility that I talked about at the beginning of my remarks that's going to provide a lot of jobs, and I think the demand will be there for that product. But not everybody wants to be an early adapter. I mean, we're all carrying smartphones around. Some have had it for a longer time than others, but there's not a lot of people that want to be early adopters. And what the auto dealers told me was, when that ruling came out, it meant, I asked them, I said, if President Trump were to win next year, and his EPA and other administrators roll back the decision, or slow walk, or however you want to characterize it, what does that do? And their answer was, because of the tight timeline imposed by the Biden administration, they've got to start working now on the design and ultimately the production of electric vehicles as they start phasing out combustion engine vehicles. And so leadership matters. It matters that President Biden gave the order to stop the construction of the border wall. He gave that order to somebody at the Department of Homeland Security, probably Secretary Mayorkas, and it stopped. He appoints the people at the EPA, and they carry out the grand vision. And so, look, I've got a lot of concerns about what we're being pushed into, and what people want, and what they can afford. And that's why these next few years are really critical. I'm trying to keep it above the board where I'm not going partisan, but I think the next year or so is really important. So with that, let me say to you all, first of all, thanks to the Farm Bureau and the Chamber for hosting me this morning. We've got a lot of tough problems. It's a tough time in our nation's history. I will say this, in my opinion, there are a lot of good men and women who are in Washington, D.C., trying to make critical decisions. I'm trying to make critical decisions, and again, I try to do what I think people at home want me to do and what I think is in the best interest of the nation, and I'll never forsake that. Thank you all very much. May God bless you all. Thank you.
And that concludes this week's 30 Minutes program. We hope you enjoyed today's show, and of course we invite you to tune in again next week at this same time as we bring you topics and information of importance to our community. From all of us here at Thunderbolt Broadcasting, until we meet again next week, I'm Charles Choate.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio. You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.